My skull exploded. I'm not exaggerating. The MRI scan I have right here shows a fracture running from my forehead all the way down to the base of my neck. A red line cutting my brain in half as if someone had tried to split my head open with an axe. 48 miles per hour. No helmet. Hot asphalt. The sound my head made hitting the pavement was, I can't describe it. My friend told me later he'll never forget it. A dry crack, followed by silence. The kind of silence that screams. Blood started pouring from my ears, and then I left my body. Before I continue, I need to make something clear. This really happened. I have the MRI scan. I have the hospital photos. I have the medical report with the stamp imminent brain death that doctors showed my parents when they called saying I had 15 days maximum. We live in an age where anyone can make up a story like this using ChatGPT. I know. That's why I'm going to give you concrete facts, specific dates, real names. October 25th, 2021, 1 month before my 21st birthday. North Carolina, United States. A backfired G3 electric skateboard capable of reaching 31 miles per hour. I had just graduated from Bible college. 3 years studying theology, memorizing verses, learning Greek and Hebrew. I thought I knew God. What a joke. The Jesus I met on the other side had nothing to do with the Jesus from my books. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it all started. Because what happened that Monday afternoon wasn't an accident, it was an invitation. My name's Gabriel. For 3 years I was the model student. I'd wake up at 5:30 a.m. to pray, read the Bible before breakfast, participated in every study group. My professors loved me. My classmates respected me. On the outside I was the perfect Christian. On the inside, I was exhausted. You know that feeling of always chasing something you never quite reach? Like God is an impossible test and you're perpetually getting a C? That's how I lived. My faith was a checklist. Pray, check. Read the Bible, check. Don't sin today, check. Evangelize someone, check. And the next day the list would restart because God was up there, arms crossed, waiting for me to qualify. I didn't love Jesus, I was trying to impress him. And being brutally honest with myself now, 3 years later, I realized that Jesus was just a religion to me. A well-intentioned tradition. A set of rules I needed to follow to avoid hell. How sad, right? I studied 3 years at Bible college and never truly knew Jesus, but all of that was about to explode. Literally. Monday. Late afternoon. Orange sky. I was at my friend Marcus's house about a mile from a lake where we always skateboarded. He had bought a new electric skateboard and called me to test it out. Dude, this thing is insane, he said, with that smile of someone who knows they're about to do something stupid. I should have thought twice. But you know, when you're 20 years old and think you're immortal? Yeah. We put the boards on the ground. I grabbed the faster model, Marcus shouted. Really no helmet? We're just going to the lake and back, I replied. What could happen? Famous last words. The descent to the lake was smooth. Wind in my face, the sensation of speed, that idiotic freedom that makes you feel alive. We circled the lake, stopped to drink water, took some photos. Ready to head back? Marcus asked. I was already on the board. The climb back had a big curve to the right, nothing scary. I had done that curve dozens of times. We accelerated. 18 miles per hour, 22 miles per hour, 25 miles per hour. I was in front, Marcus right behind. The wind whistling in my ears. Adrenaline rising. 28 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour. And then I saw it, a pothole, small, almost invisible, in the middle of the lane exactly where my front wheel was going to pass. No time to swerve. The wheel locked, the board stopped. My body didn't. Basic physics. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. I flew. It wasn't like in the movies where everything goes slow motion and you have time to think. It was instantaneous. 1 second I was on the board, the next second I was flying headfirst toward the asphalt. The impact was, there are no words. You know when you drop an egg on the floor? The sound the shell makes when it cracks? It was like that, except the egg was my skull. I didn't feel pain. This is important. People always ask me, did it hurt? No, because pain is something your brain processes. And my brain had just, well, cracked. What I felt was a strange kind of pressure, like my head was a balloon being deflated. And then nothing. Marcus told me later what he saw. I fell. My body hit the ground with a horrible impact. My head bounced off the asphalt. Once. Twice. Blood exploded from my ears, nose, mouth. My eyes rolled back, turned completely white. My body started shaking. Violent convulsions. Arms twisting. Legs kicking the air. And then I stopped breathing. Marcus screamed my name. Nothing. Shook my shoulder. Nothing. Put his ear to my chest. Silence. He told me it was the scariest silence of his life, because living people's chests make noise. They breathe. They wheeze something. Mine was silent. He grabbed his phone with trembling hands and called 911. My friend fell off a skateboard. He He's not breathing. There's blood coming out of his ears. I think he's dead. I think he's dead. 7 minutes. That's how long it took for the ambulance to arrive. 7 minutes that, according to paramedics, were technically impossible to survive without permanent brain damage. But I wasn't there anymore. When the ambulance arrived, paramedics measured my breathing. Once every 60 seconds. Maybe. My lips were purple. My skin gray. They intubated me right there on the street, put a cervical collar on, strapped my head to a board. On the way to the hospital, one paramedic whispered to the other, "He's not going to make it." I know this because, somehow, I was watching everything. It wasn't gradual. 1 second I was in my body. The next second I was floating 10 feet above it. And the first thing I thought was, why the hell am I wearing that ridiculous shirt? I know, it sounds absurd. You just left your body and the first thing you notice is your clothes? But it was so strange, seeing my own body from the outside, like it was someone else. My face was pale, blood running down the side of my head, eyes closed, mouth half open. And the strangest thing, that body wasn't me. It was like looking at old clothes hanging in the closet. Something you wore for a while, but that isn't really you. A shell, a disposable wrapper. The real me was up there, completely awake, completely alive, and I felt incredible. No pain, no fear, no confusion, just absolute clarity. I looked at Marcus, who was holding my lifeless body in his arms, crying desperately, and my heart broke for him, because I knew something he didn't know. I knew I was going to be okay. I don't know how I knew. I just knew. Like, the sky is blue. Like, you're breathing. It was absolute certainty etched into my existence. And then I prayed. For the first time in my life, I truly prayed. No formulas, no memorized verses, no trying to impress anyone. Father, take care of him. He's going to need you in the coming days more than I will. And the moment I finished that prayer, I was sucked up. There's no other word. It wasn't like floating. It wasn't like flying. It was like the entire universe had become a giant vacuum cleaner and I was the dirt being pulled upward at impossible speed. Light everywhere. But it wasn't blinding light. It was warm light, living, conscious. And then I was there. Heaven. But not the heaven from paintings. Not the heaven from movies. Not the heaven from my theology classes. When people ask me what was heaven like, I don't know how to answer. Because the question is wrong. Heaven isn't a place. Heaven is a person. Let me explain. When you think of heaven, you imagine clouds, pearly gates, streets of gold, right? A physical, geographical place where you go after you die. But what I discovered is that heaven isn't where you go, it's who you're with. The moment I arrived, I don't even know what to call it. Arrived, was transported, woke up. The moment I was there, the first thing I felt wasn't a place, it was a presence. And that presence had eyes. Jesus. But listen, the Jesus I met had nothing to do with the Jesus I studied. Zero. Nothing. For 3 years. I read about Jesus, memorized verses about Jesus, wrote academic papers about Jesus, and I didn't know Jesus. How is it possible to study someone for 3 years and not know that person? Because knowledge isn't relationship. The Jesus from my books was well-behaved, predictable, domesticated, a gentle teacher, a spiritual guru, a moral example. The Jesus I met was wild. Not in the sense of uncontrolled, but in the sense of untamable. Impossible to fit into categories. Impossible to reduce to formulas. His eyes. My God, his eyes I'll never forget. Even now, 3 years later, when I close my eyes, I can still see them. Liquid oceans of love. But it wasn't a cute love. It wasn't a condescending love. It wasn't a love that looked at me with pity. It was a fierce love. A love that saw me exactly as I was, every dirty thought, every lie, every moment of pride, every secret sin, and still looked at me as if I were the most precious thing in the universe. And here comes the part that's going to offend some people. I don't care. When Jesus looked at me, he didn't look at my sin because my sin didn't exist. Wait, let me rephrase. My sin existed. Of course it existed. I sinned. A lot. We all sin. But there, in his presence, my sin had been so completely erased, so totally obliterated, that it was as if it had never happened. Not just forgiven, not just forgotten, erased from reality. And you know what my reaction was? Panic. Because this didn't make sense. I panicked because I learned for 3 years that salvation works like this. 1. You sin. 2. You repent. 3. You try not to sin again. 4. You fail. 5. Go back to step 1. An infinite cycle of failure and forgiveness. You're always owing. God's always collecting. You're always trying to qualify. But there, before Jesus, I realized something that destroyed all my theology. I didn't need to qualify, because he had already qualified me. There was no test. There was no exam. There was no list of requirements. When Jesus looked at me, he didn't see Gabriel dash the dash sinner dash trying dash to dash be dash good. He saw Gabriel the son, and the difference is absolutely everything. A servant needs to qualify. A son simply is. And then Jesus spoke. Not with audible words, but somehow more real than words, as if his thoughts were being transmitted telepathically directly to mine. Gabriel, do you think I died to give you a list of rules? Silence. Do you think I suffered on the cross to create another religion? My tears, if spirits can cry, began to fall. I didn't die to make you religious. I died to make you free. And then he did something that completely broke me. He smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a condescending smile. A smile of pride, like a father watching his son take his first steps. And I thought, wait, what? Pride in me? But I didn't do anything. I'm here because I was stupid enough to skateboard without a helmet at 30 miles per hour. And then came the answer, not in words, but in pure knowledge poured directly into my consciousness. Gabriel, you were never qualified by what you do. You're qualified by who I am. When I look at you, I don't see your mistakes. I see my blood. And my blood doesn't make you acceptable. My blood makes you perfect. My mind exploded. Because for 3 years I tried to become worthy. For 3 years I tried to sin less, pray more, be better. And Jesus was telling me I was already perfect. Not because of me, because of him. And then the visions began. He just showed me things. Not like a movie. More like as if my consciousness expanded and suddenly I could see beyond time and space. The first vision was about me. I saw my conception, not graphically, but spiritually. I saw the exact moment when my father's sperm met my mother's egg. And I saw that in that moment, all of heaven stopped. Angels at attention. Silent cherubim, seraphim with folded wings. And a voice, the Father's voice, echoing through all eternity. Gabriel is being sent. As if my existence wasn't a biological accident, but a divine mission. As if I wasn't a statistical error, but a specific answer to a specific question. And then I saw the question. Years before my conception, a woman I never met was praying. Knees on the floor, tears streaming, hands raised. God, raise up a generation that knows your heart, not your rules. Your heart. And God heard, and God answered. And the answer was, me. This destroyed me, because suddenly I understood. I'm not an accident. Nobody is an accident. Every person born on this planet is a divine answer to a human prayer. You're not here by chance. You're intentional, purposeful, essential. The second vision was about Earth. I saw the connection between heaven and Earth, and it wasn't how I imagined. I thought heaven was a distant place, separated from Earth by an impenetrable barrier. You live here, suffer here, and when you die, if you're lucky, you go there. But what Jesus showed me was completely different. Heaven and Earth aren't separated. They're intertwined. Like two dimensions occupying the same space but on different frequencies. And here comes the crazy part. We humans have authority to connect these two dimensions through prayer, but not religious prayer. Not those memorized recitations you repeat without thinking. True prayer. When someone on earth prays, I mean really prays, something happens in heaven. I saw how it works. The prayer rises like golden smoke. It crosses dimensions, arrives before God's throne. And if that prayer is aligned with His will, if it's rooted in His word, if it's spoken by someone who understands their identity as a son, God doesn't just hear, He mobilizes. Angels receive orders. Circumstances begin to change. Doors open. Doors close. Physical reality is literally rewritten. And the craziest part? God needs us to do this. Not because He's weak, but because He created a spiritual law. Authority on earth belongs to humans. When Adam and Eve fell, they handed that authority to the enemy. When Jesus died and rose again, He recovered that authority. And then He did something shocking. He didn't keep that authority for Himself. He gave it back to us. All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go. He gave us His power, His authority, His name. And now when we pray in Jesus' name, we're not asking permission. We're exercising authority. We're literally commanding heaven to invade earth. And then Jesus showed me why I was there. Gabriel, there's a reason you didn't die today. My heart, if spirits have hearts, accelerated. While your body is in the ICU, there are people praying. Your mother, your father, your friends from college, people you've never met. And then He showed me. I saw my mother on her knees in the kitchen of our house in Virginia, hands raised, voice hoarse from crying so much. It's God, I give you my son. If you're going to take him, take him. But if there's any possibility, any gap, any chance, bring him back. I saw my father alone in the car parked at the hospital, punching the steering wheel, screaming, He's yours. He's always been yours. I won't question. But Father, Father, please, I saw my class from Bible college gathered in the chapel at 3 a.m., 47 people in a circle, each praying out loud. We declare life over Gabriel. We declare purpose. We declare that the enemy's plan has been canceled in Jesus' name. And I saw something that left me speechless. Each prayer created a bridge, literally. A golden, solid bridge connecting heaven to earth. And these bridges weren't just symbolic. They were the way back. Jesus looked at me and said, "It's through these bridges that you'll return. Because Gabriel, you're not here to stay. You're here to see, to understand, to go back and tell." And then he commissioned me. You will be the voice of the voiceless. You will speak for the nations. You will be the answer to prayers that haven't even been prayed yet. But first, you need to understand something. He held my face, and yes, spirits can touch and look directly into my eyes. What you've experienced here in minutes will sustain you for decades, because you're going back to a generation that doesn't know me. They know religion, they know rules, they know tradition, but they don't know me, and you're going to show them who I really am. Tears streaming. Are you ready? I wanted to say no, I wanted to stay, because there, with him, I was complete in a way I'd never experienced, but then I looked down and I saw the bridges. Dozens of them, hundreds of them, thousands of them, each prayer, each declaration of faith. People who didn't even know me, praying for the young man who fell off a skateboard. And I knew. It wasn't about me. It was about them. About you. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The return wasn't smooth. It was violent. Like being pulled through a tight tunnel full of broken glass, being crushed from all sides. And then pain. God, the pain. My body was on fire. My head throbbed as if someone was hammering my skull from the inside. My lungs burned with each breath. I tried to open my eyes. Couldn't. They were swollen, stuck together. Tried to move my fingers. Nothing. As if my body had forgotten how to function. I panicked. Because in heaven, I was free, light, complete. And now I was trapped again in this box of broken flesh and bone. I heard voices in the distance. Brain activity impossible. Call the family. I tried to scream. Tried to say I'm here, I'm awake. But my throat was blocked by a tube. I spent the next few days drifting in and out of consciousness. Each time I woke up, the pain was worse. The doctors told me later that my body was in shock, that I shouldn't have survived the initial trauma, that every hour that passed without complete brain death was a medical miracle. They used that word miracle as if it were just a figure of speech. I knew it was literal. On the 18th day, I finally opened my eyes for real. My mother was sitting beside the bed, head resting on her hand, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. I tried to speak, but only a hoarse moan came out. She woke up immediately, and when our eyes met, she collapsed. Fell to her knees beside the bed, holding my hand, sobbing so violently that her whole body shook. "You came back," she repeated. "You came back. You came back." And I wanted to say, "Mom, I never left. I was there the whole time. I saw you praying. I saw your tears building bridges that brought me back." But all that came out was, "Hi, Mom." And she laughed. Through the tears, she laughed. "Hi, my son. Welcome back." Recovery was brutal. I had to learn to walk again. My balance was destroyed. My brain had to rebuild neural connections that were severed by the trauma. I had to learn to speak again. The first few weeks, my sentences came out scrambled as if my mouth couldn't keep up with my brain. I had to learn to eat again. Food tasted like cardboard. Everything made me nauseous. But the hardest part was coming back to live in this world after seeing the other one. Because now I knew. I knew that most of what we call important is completely irrelevant. I knew that most of what worries us doesn't matter eternally. I knew that we spend our entire lives chasing things we'll leave behind in 70, 80, 90 years. And most importantly, I knew who Jesus really is. And that changed everything. I went back to church for the first time 3 months after the accident, still using a cane. My head was still partially shaved because of the surgeries. The pastor preached about trying harder for God, about pursuing holiness through discipline, about qualifying for the calling. And I had to leave. Not because I was angry, but because I couldn't swallow that anymore. Because the Jesus I met doesn't demand effort. He demands surrender. The Jesus I met doesn't want your performance. He wants your presence. The Jesus I met isn't counting your sins. He's celebrating your identity. In the following months, I lost some friends, people who thought I had gone off theologically. I lost my leadership position at church. The council decided my visions were potentially problematic. I lost my reputation as a model Christian, and I gained Jesus, for real, for the first time. And it was worth every loss. So let me ask you a question. Why are you still reading? Seriously, this is over 7,000 words. You could have closed this page a long time ago, but you didn't. Why? I'll tell you why. For the same reason I fell off that skateboard. For For the same reason I was in a coma for 18 days. For the same reason I came back, because you were called. Not by accident, not by algorithm, not because you clicked the right link. Because the same Jesus who met me on the other side is calling you now, from this side. And he doesn't want your religion. He wants you. He doesn't care how many times you've sinned this week. He's not counting how many times you failed to read the Bible. He's not waiting for you to qualify, because you're already qualified. By his blood, by his righteousness, by the identity he gave you before the foundation of the world. And right now, in this exact moment, you have a choice. You can close this page and go back to your normal life. Go back to religion. Go back to the checklist. Go back to trying to be good enough. Or you can do what I did in heaven. Surrender. Simply surrender. Stop trying. Stop striving. Stop qualifying. And accept what's already true. You are loved with the same love that the Father loves Jesus. You are completely accepted, not because of what you do, but because of what he did. You are a son. You are a daughter. Not a servant. Not a slave. Not an employee. Family. And if you're feeling something right now, a tightness in your chest, a lump in your throat, tears starting to form, it's not cheap emotion. It's recognition. Your soul recognizing his voice. So here's what I want you to do. Stop reading for a second. Put your hand on your chest. Feel your heart beating. And whisper, Jesus, I surrender my religion to you. I surrender my attempts. I surrender my effort. And in exchange, I accept your identity. I accept your love. I accept that I am yours. Completely. Eternally. Perfectly. And then live. Not as a servant trying to impress a boss, but as a son resting in a father's love. Because that's the message I brought from the other side. And it's the message that will change your eternity. Welcome to the family. Welcome home.